Welcome back to the Contech Onsite podcast. Today, we have James Hillegas. He's the Director of Manufacturing at BIMTech Offsite. In this podcast, James is going to describe how he developed a passion for BIM. It's a transformative story with great advice for anyone interested in starting their own BIM journey. We also discuss the importance of connecting between the field and design and the benefits of mentorship and coupling between industry experience and tech savviness. James, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, man.
I'm so glad you got on the podcast. You know, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of your journey and how also you got to BIMTech?
Sure. So I was always interested in construction ever since I was younger. Like even before, as a toddler, as a kid, I was always fascinated by construction equipment. Particularly, we grew up behind a farm, or what used to be a farm. It's now a high school. And I loved watching them bale hay. We used to make my mom stop just to watch the tractors, bale hay and spit it out. So I was always fascinated with, the big equipment and, was kind of a nerd, was really a nerd growing up. So math and science came pretty easy for me. And in high school, when I started as a freshman, they had what was called in the States, I think it was called like engineering lead the way or something of that effect. And it was basically like different tastes of engineering, different like paths of engineering. So like 1 year was like electrical, 1 year was mechanical, 1 year was biomedical, 1 year was, I forget something else. Anyway, my freshman year of high school was 3D modeling. So the software was Autodesk Inventor, which is kind of where I first really learned how to 3D model. And then after college my parents kind of steered me towards like civil engineering just because I enjoyed being outside. I love being outside. I wasn't really a big video game nerd, but I was good with math and science, but I liked being outdoors. So they kind of steered me towards a civil engineering path. And, through college, worked both the design side and the construction side. So I worked for a GC firm for a couple of years, worked for a design engineering firm for a couple of years. I liked the GC side a little bit more. And I basically learned that I was neurologically divergent, which people could say you're on the spectrum, off the spectrum, whatever the case might be. But one of the things with people like this is they're very good at visualizing things in three-dimensional space. It's like one of their skill sets. And there's definitely weaknesses, like social settings, like big parties, not very social butterfly, very awkward. But when it came to visualizing things in 3D, I was very good at it. And so I picked that up and kind of ran with it. And it came just very naturally to me. It's a gift from God. I didn't pick it. It's just one of the blessings. And so, making my way through the career field, I worked for GC after college. I'll kind of speed up a little bit to the 3D modeling side. So working for a GC, it was a hospital project, and there was just a few things that were rather difficult to coordinate. And I was someone who was able to use Revit and AutoCAD and kind of went through the process of making coordination drawings for a certain scope of work that was just having some issues due to the complexity of the work. And kind of one thing led to another. It led me to working for the framing contractor after that job was over. And I kind of worked in the prefab shop. Now at the time, I thought I was good with modeling, but I still had a lot to learn as, it's been 3 or 4 years since that happened, 5 years. But at the time when I got to the framing contractor, there was a carpenter there who was a journeyman carpenter, probably 25 years in the field. And so we kind of came together and we both had the mindset of wanting to push things forward, but from different ends of the spectrum. He had 25 years of field experience. His computer skills weren't that great, but that's not a problem. And I had the computer skills, my field experience was very minimal. And so between the two of us, we kind of came together. I kind of showed him what was possible from a computer standpoint, and he kind of, explained to me, okay, hey, it's not how we do this. This goes like this. You would frame a corner like this. This is how. Even the basics of on-center spacing. So my first panel job, I didn't carry layout across the panels, and so what happened when they went to hang drywall on the interior of the project, the on-center spacing, every panel was roughly, 8 feet long, something of that nature. I know a lot of people are listening from overseas and don't know whatever that would be in meters, like 2.3 meters, 2.4 meters. That was just one of it's a very basic thing in construction, the on-center spacing, but I messed it up. And so just, going through that process, kind of led me down this path of the prefab world. And to skip a couple steps ahead, I worked for a startup there, like very briefly before COVID started. had to move states from one state to another state. And they laid me off when COVID happened. And that's kind of a long story, like a very, very quick story of how I ended up down here in Atlanta. BIMTech Prefab happened to be here in Atlanta. I was laid off and just looking for something else. I knew the president of the company from just prior interactions on social media, or on LinkedIn, I guess, and kind of reached out after that happened. And that's how I ended up here in a very quick summary. So.
Okay, so you just shared a ton, and we'll try unpacking it throughout the rest of the podcast. But maybe you could also share just a word or two about what BIMTech is and what your role there is and kind of what type of work you do.
Yeah, so BIMTech Prefab, there's two companies in the same. So the main company is Reliance Interiors, and that's your typical commercial framing and drywall contractor. You know, stick building, ceilings, drywall, hanging, taping, finishing, framing, all metal studs. We don't really deal with wood too much. And in 2020, they started a panel division. So Reliance itself has installed panels for other people in the past, other manufacturers. And they decided, they would want to start their own division. So they started their own division called BIMTech. Really, it's a sister company of Reliance Interiors. The name's about the only difference. So at BIMTech, we provide cold form metal framing solutions, both interior and exterior, and load and non-load bearing. And we'll also do other miscellaneous things for the field, like anything we can prefab at this point. We're really trying to push as much as we can into our fabrication facility that services our on-site team. So it's a very hand-in-hand relationship. There's really the only the difference is in the two names, but it's basically a commercial framing and drywall contractor that just happens to have a panel division, as is becoming more common, at least in the United States. I can't speak for much else in the world, but.
Okay, cool. So you're describing this like a little bit before, but you had like this thirst or knowledge, passion, kind of a born passion for the construction industry. And I guess also somewhat of a gift, right, in visualizing things in 3D. What could you kind of share from your earlier story of really starting pretty young, and what were, maybe if you could elaborate also, what are the benefits of it? Because I'm sure like walking into a GC and then starting to work with subcontractors and having, a lot of experience in early experience in design, had an impact on where you got to today. Maybe you could shed light on, what that passion, what drove you to have such a passion, and then as well, how's this talent of visualizing things in 3D contributed to your career till now?
Yeah, so as far as contributing to my career, to answer your last question first, that's really been, I built my entire career on BIM. So, like I said, I first learned Autodesk Inventor because that was just the software that we first learned, which was a lot more like mechanical engineering based. And really all the class was, looking back, was basically reverse engineering. So like the teacher taught us the basics of the program, but really the way we learned is he just went to here in the States, we have like Dollar Generals or Dollar Trees, like cheap stores that sell like cheap toys. And he would go buy random objects, and your assignment basically the whole semester was reverse engineering various things he bought at the dollar store. So he would buy little toys that had multiple components. He gave you a set of tools and dial calipers and told you to reverse engineer the components. And you had to go through, model all the components, assemble them back into the main, device, if you will. And then you had to apply the correct constraints. Like one of them I remember very vividly was like a ball popper. So it had like a little handle, there was a basket on top, there was a clicker that would click and a ball would pop up, and you had to get the basket underneath the ball to catch it. You had all those little individual components, and you had to get everything to work, the cylinder to stay locked in the model, all the different constraints. And so I kind of built my career off that. I learned Revit off of YouTube, honestly. That's where I just watched hours of YouTube videos. Like Paul Aubin was one, Revit After Dark, Aaron Mahler, a few other people that make a lot of videos, Balkan Architect. These are all guys on YouTube, and I just watched as many videos as they published, and I would watch and try and learn and just try and implement different things that they shared, if you will, along the way as I was progressing through my career. And one, learning how to model or learning how to use Revit, which is the modeling software we predominantly use. Also learning like construction and just learning different things about the field. Thing to your first question was like showing initiative. I think one of the things I did correctly, if I look back in my life, was I didn't necessarily ask for permission to do something. I believed enough in BIM that I just knew it was the right solution to certain problems. And I didn't really say, hey, can I do this or can I not do this? I spent my own time after hours learning how to use it, and then two, just using it and just then showing people the results and kind of saying like, here's what we can do, here's how this can work. And even though perhaps I didn't have the experience that I needed to fully utilize the tool, the initiative and the willingness to just do it, even if it was not done correctly, gave my at the time superiors confidence to say, okay, this kid might not know exactly how to build per se, but he's willing to take initiative, he's willing to learn, he kind of has the right idea, but if we can help steer him in the right direction, then this can become something that's beneficial, and this can, if that makes sense.
Yeah, okay, really cool. So really kind of you just kind of described how your passion for design and being able to, we'll say, deconstruct or to kind of figure out, how something's supposed to be built, what it is, that passion, even if you'll be making mistakes, but that willingness to try and model, right, was something that you felt, and I guess your environment kind of recognized as a tremendous value that we were bringing to the table. Would love to also hear, what from your perspective is so critical about BIM and why people are not using BIM today, if are people who are not using BIM today missing out on something very critical that's happening in the industry?
Sure, so a couple things. One is most people at least do a 2D takeoff, whether they do it on paper with a scale or whether they use some type of digital program. There's plenty of them out there, or even some AI assisted program. I think the biggest benefits of BIM is, one, it still gives you the quantity takeoff that you typically derive to form a project budget from 2D takeoff, however you get that done. But the other benefit of BIM is it allows you to have to physically or digitally construct a building using whatever documentation you have before you actually construct the building. So you get a chance to see, like, these details don't make sense. The EOR, the engineer of record, is saying the beam should be here. The architect is showing the beam at a different elevation. Now the window doesn't fit. What are we going to make the window smaller? Are we going to raise up the steel? What are we going to do? So kind of that's one of the biggest benefits of BIM, is it still gives you the quantity takeoff. So there's really no difference between the 2D takeoff and the 3D takeoff. You still get quantities. The biggest benefit is that's just a chance to construct the building and kind of see what issues might arise, because when you look at 2D plans, your mind can trick yourself. It's kind of like when you proofread a paper in school. You can put in words that aren't really there when you just read it to yourself. I don't know if this is true for everybody, but I had a professor, I think, in college once, that said you should always proofread your papers backwards, because it jumbles the words up in your mind, and so you're really having to think, like, read very slowly, like cat, bat, that, and you can't add words mentally where they're supposed to be, where they're not on paper. That's kind of one of the things that can happen when you're looking at 2D drawings, just kind of trying to mentally take this plan view, this section cut, that keynote, this call out, and trying to construct everything in your head. In your head, it might seem fine, but once you start to look at it in a 3D model from the different angles, you're like, this isn't going to work, or there's not quite enough room here to make this detail work, or whatever the case might be. And then people can get into all the downstream benefits of fabrication and robotics and 4D and 5D and all the different marketing terms that people use. But I think that's the biggest benefit, just the pure constructability of it. And I think one of the reasons is it seems daunting, I guess, for a lot of people, myself included. And I had a friend in college that we used a program called MATLAB in grad school, which some people might be familiar with. And I hated the software. I hated it. I didn't like using it. It was complicated. I wasn't good at it. But he's like, look, we were in composite materials class. I can still remember it. And he was like, here's how you learn the software. He's like, you know how to use your calculator, right? I'm like, yeah, I've used it since like 8th grade. He's like, okay, you can no longer use your calculator. Even if it's something as simple as 2 + 2, you have to use MATLAB for it. And what he was saying is basically, like, just use it for the simple stuff, because it's going to build your confidence in the program to when you get to, by the time we got to the end of the semester, we were analyzing composite materials of airplanes. There was like thousands and thousands of lines of math. But because he taught me at the beginning, just, hey, use it for the simple stuff, 9 × 9 or 2 + 2, or just very simple formulas, just to get your confidence in, writing out correctly, using the correct punctuation, because it's basically writing like code, to build your confidence in using the software. That way, when we get to the end of the semester, you have this big project, it's not so daunting, because you've been practicing all throughout the year with small little steps. And so, like for BIM, don't necessarily try and model the whole building. Maybe there's a few areas that are like pretty complicated. There's this radius, you have a beam coming in here, there's this window trying to fit, you have all these different dimensions. Just model that small portion, don't worry about the rest of the building. And so what it'll do is it'll give you the confidence to go, okay, I learned how to use the curtain wall tool, I learned how to use the floor tool, I learned how to use the dimensions, I learned how to change the depth of the beam, I learned how to load different beams. It'll give you the confidence, that way when you have the opportunity to model a full job, whatever the case might be, it's not so daunting. And I think, when people look at 3D models on the screen, they see all this crap. They see studs and beams and columns and concrete and pipes and fittings and hangers and all this stuff. It's like, holy crap, I don't know what to do. This is confusing. I'm not even gonna look at it. So just, instead of doing that, like that kid that in grad school taught me, he's like, hey, just start with something small. Find a complicated part of the building, a part that's potentially a lot of risk to the project, and just model that. And what it'll do is, it'll give you confidence in how to use a tool. And then 2, it'll give your team confidence that you know how to use the tool. And so they'll probably start coming to you with more and more, hey, can you try this? Can you do this? And then over time, those skills will just build up.
So I think it's really inspiring. You're like a super self-learner because, you're just sharing how you're going on YouTube to learn Revit. And now you're also sharing on, like a really pragmatic kind of approach of, just start with things as, start with the small things, so the easy functions of the software, and then build your confidence with it, and then you'll also build the confidence of everybody around you. Okay, so I think that's super inspiring for a lot of people who find just the idea of starting to learn BIM daunting. That you went through all of that, and you're willing to go through a lot of hard work, it seems, right, to take on this skill set. In your latest role, there was a person who had a lot of on-site experience, right? And he came from construction. What was the fallacy that you had? What were the things that you were overlooking, and what was his value to bring to the table? And how important was it for both of you guys to sit down and work together?
Yes, I think like a lot of people, people just look at construction as a bunch of like idiots or knuckle dragging people that just build a building. And when you truly think about it, the way to explain construction to someone is, okay, we're going to stare at this empty field, okay? And in this field, this is going to be a hospital, okay? This building is going to defy gravity. It's not going to fall down. It can potentially withstand an earthquake. It's going to fight off, snow, sleet, hail. It's going to keep the temperature the same all year round, no matter how hot it gets, how cold it gets. It's going to keep the weather out. And we're going to construct this entire thing here. And all you can do is you have to visualize the whole thing in like your head by looking at different pieces of information. Mm-hmm. It's not as easy as it first seems. And one of the eye-opening things for me was we built a hospital, and it was near the parking deck, so it was an addition to a hospital. So there was already a portion of the hospital was already there. We were building a new wing or tower for them, and every day there'd be doctors, nurses, whatever, people that were employees of the hospital that would stand in the parking garage, which was across the street or across the alley, and they would just watch people work. And it wasn't anything monumental. Some days, we had crane picks, and some days, they were lifting up giant air handling units and different things, but they were still just mesmerized by the process of literally what they once saw was a pile of dirt with a hole in the ground. That's what it started as, because there was things there before. And over the course of time, this structure was erected out of seemingly nothing. And so one of the fallacies I had was I thought building panels, which was mainly what I do, was relatively simple. Some studs, studs, some framing, some tracks, some screws, pretty simple. If I go back and look at the first drawings I produced, the drawings I have now, it's not even close to the things that I've learned. Something as simple as like, we don't want to have to pull out our tape measure every single measurement. And we want to set it here at 0, but we want it to increase all the way across. Here's 1'4". Here is now 2'10". Here is now 3'6". We don't want to go 1'4", move the tape measure back to 0, now 1'10", back to 0, 6 inches, back to 0, 8 inches. We want to set it here at 0. We want to go incrementally increasing. That way we're not constantly pulling the tape measure, because if I'm pulling the tape measure every single time for all these dimensions, I'm increasing the chance of getting it wrong because I'm having to re-zero the tape measure every single one of these different numbers. And so that was just one fallacy I learned from like start here at 0 and just go across, for as long as the tape measure is 100 foot. Obviously there's the different units, but whatever the case might be. So that was just one simple fallacy. Two is, again, I just thought it was pretty simple, and then how hard can this really be? And the naivete allowed me just to do it without really knowing what I was doing, and his willingness to teach me everything that he knew and all the mistakes I was making without really getting super mad and frustrated allowed me to learn what he had experienced in the field and what worked and what didn't work and how things were supposed to go.
So I'm thinking of, like how probably entering this process, you're kind of naive to understanding probably, a lot of the complexity that goes into the process. How was it to get the first kind of like feedback or pushback, from someone from the field who doesn't understand kind of what you're doing? Was it hard at all, or was it something that was easy for you?
No, it was hard. I mean, don't get me wrong. I've been cussed out. I've been called every swear word in the English language. I mean, the reason I'm so detail oriented now and so try to be very, very meticulous and make sure things are very documented and addressed is because, I've been cussed out. I've messed up opening sizes for doors. I've mislocated doors. I've messed up framing. I've put studs over plumbing. I've put studs too tall. I've put studs too short. I've missed deliveries. I've all sorts of stuff, mislabeled panels, rotated them the wrong way. I've made not all the mistakes. I mean, I hope I made all the mistakes because I'm tired of making them. You've gone through the process and you have to learn. And at times it's hard to hear, it's frustrating. I don't like necessarily being criticized like that. I do take it very personally because it's something I put, my time into. But I try and look at it as I've tried. I'm not good at it, but over time, take it as feedback. They're just a customer. The foreman in the field is just a customer giving me feedback for how to improve my product. And if I take his advice or her advice or their advice, whatever, and I implement it into my product, then it's going to make my product better. And so I've tried to look at it less of like a personal attack because I take it personally. I mean, it'll throw off an entire day. It'll throw off an entire 2 days if people get pissed for something that came out of the shop. I'll mull over it. I'll think about it on the drive home. I'll think about it on the way to work. I mean, I think about it a lot. But I tried to say, okay, they're just a customer. They're giving me feedback on how I can improve my product. Now, if I choose to ignore their feedback, they're probably not going to become a customer. They're probably not going to want to do this again, And so it's kind of, having that ebb and flow dynamic of understanding kind of where they're coming from and what they're offering you. Now, also you can push back on them because at the same time, like I can't cater everything to every different person the way they want it. There's certain things that I have to keep standard, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. One guy might want to read his things from left to right and one guy wants it from right to left. Like, okay, we made a decision that's left to right. That's just how we're doing this dimension. That's going from here to here. We can't make it, it's kind of that, I guess it comes with experience and, you have to be, I guess, willing to just learn the hard way or trying to find someone that can teach you, what they messed up or what they did wrong in the past.
So it takes a lot of, I think it takes a lot of guts to be able to get feedback, but I also think that it reflects a culture, right? That maybe within, maybe it's even within BIMTech, or it's a culture that you have, with other people who are working with you and their willingness to kind of deal with the offsets of the problems or challenges that happen due to the design, but also, BIMTech itself of like saying, okay, this is the price to pay to, to lead and to model in 3D, to lead with BIM models. So what would you say is that true? Is it a good reflection of culture? How would you describe the culture, and how open is the culture to mistakes?
I mean, I think mistakes are part of the human condition. Whether you use BIM or not, mistakes happen on every job site. Now, you might not always know about them as someone in the office. Foreman might handle them himself. They might do something that you don't find out about the mistake. But when the mistake comes from the office to the field, then you're probably you'll find out about it one way or another. I think the biggest thing is showing that you care. If you show intent that you care or you're trying to make it better, you're not trying to screw it up, because there's a lot of pressure on the line, right? There's a lot of money on the line in construction. There's schedule. There's a lot of legalities on the line. Like, it's not a very easy industry, and there's not a lot of room for error in construction. People don't estimate jobs with the ability to make mistakes. Jobs are estimated to be essentially perfect, and mistakes are essentially you're starting to lose your own profit. And so, from that standpoint, it's understandable for why people can get frustrated and get very upset and angry. If you can have a sense of, willing to make it better, understanding, showing that you care, I think it goes over a long way. So a good story I have is the first job out of college was a large hospital, 9-figure hospital. I was put in a position that really was not even close to qualified for. And I remember the glazer, the glass guy, who contractor installed curtain wall, the foreman. This was over the course of, I've been on the job now for 9-10 months. And he came out to me one day and he was like, when you first came on the job, I thought you were like a little cocky, I'm not going to use the exact language, but it was explicitive, cocky little kid. That's the impression I got of you. The guy, because of that job, we worked a lot of weekends, and I was there every weekend. And a lot of the other office or field or GC management wasn't there, but I was there. And what I learned is, even though I couldn't really help them per se, because I really didn't know what I didn't know, like I didn't know what to look for. I had no idea how to look ahead. Like every day there was making mistakes, and not even, in my position, I should have known what to look for, but I didn't have the experience. Mm-hmm. But because I was there on Saturdays with them, I could have been at home doing other stuff, just like everybody else was. But I was there, so it showed that I cared. And the glass guy was like, look, man, it's like, I know you don't really know what you're looking for. He was probably 40 or 50 years old, 45, late 30s, something like that. And he'd been working as a glass contractor since he was 18. So he already had 20 years experience. He's like, look, I know you really don't know what you're looking for, but you're out here, and it shows that you care. So they were kind of willing to take me under their wing, so to speak, and kind of point out the different things of like, this is how this works, and explain things to me, like the stupid questions. Just explaining things because I had a willingness to learn. I showed that I cared. I couldn't really help you avoid mistakes or look out for things. I didn't have the experience. I didn't know. But it was just the pure willingness to like be there, be interested, just allowed them to not get so frustrated, if that makes sense. They still got mad. I mean, I still got cussed at. Things still went wrong. It wasn't like sunshine and rainbows, but just the ability to be present and to care, I think it just goes a long way. Like that really makes the biggest difference. If you care, people will pick up on it. They'll be willing to kind of put up with the bumps along the roads. But if you don't, then it's going to be a much harder road to hoe.
So in the end, that's actually pretty amazing. So the fact that you cared, right, created this sense of empathy and willingness to collaborate and work with you and help you overcome maybe some of some shortcomings, right, that were going on. But the fact that people saw you actually cared and people wanted to help, right? They wanted to help and support you, and to do it right, to make it happen, to make it work. I think, first of all, I love it because there's a lot. It seems like the construction industry lacks a lot of empathy. In most places, like you're talking about cussing out. I think there is a culture within the construction industry. It's like a tough love, kind of environment, and everything costs money. And sometimes pilots, if you're a pilot of a plane, there's mistakes that you can't do. So just kind of the way you're describing it, I think is very inspiring for a lot of people. Willing to take on mistakes, but caring enough to really also be there enough. Like you're saying, you skip weekends to be able to deliver. I think that's very inspiring. And it also leads me into another line of questions, which really is, what today within your role in prefab, right? You're prefabricating panels to the most part, right? What does your day look like, and how is BIM at the end of the day essential for your line of work?
So BIM's 100% essential for the line of work. Like everything that goes to the fab shop went through the model at some point, or was modeled at some point, to make fabrication drawings, to make bill of materials, to make the CNC files that run some of the machines we have. We have roll formers. They're not really a true CNC machine in the sense of like a 5-axis or 6-axis CNC, but for lack of better words, we load a file into it. It's like a CNC machine. It's the easy way to explain it. It's like 3D printing metal studs. That's roll forming. That's an easy way to explain it too. Mm-hmm. So BIM's 100% critical. Everything that goes to the fab shop went through the model at some point. For the most part, blocking, there's some minor cut lists, I guess, that's not 100% true that don't go through the model, but for the most part, a lot of it does. So 100% critical. As far as the day-to-day, that it can vary widely. I mean, I would say the main tasks are, we have a team of detailers. First, it was just me. Then over the course of time, we've built up a team of detailers, and so it's usually making sure they have stuff to do, answering any questions they have, because they're still learning too. So answering their questions, reviewing their work, getting answers from GCs, talking to the field, coordinating deliveries. We, in particular where we are, so I live near Atlanta, Georgia, which is one of the larger cities in the United States. We do a lot of work downtown. So logistics are a very, very key role, or a key thing that goes on. So coordinating deliveries, we have very tight delivery schedules to hit because the job sites are right downtown. So there's not a lot of room, especially for closing down lanes. So talking to the field, coordinating logistics. Some days are more sales oriented. We have general contractors come through. For example, we have a GC coming through on Wednesday of this week that we're recording. So it all kind of varies. Though some days are very operational heavy, like just purely operations, like coordination meetings, reviewing different things from our team of detailers, talking to the guys in the shop, making sure that the shop's lined up, that they have what they need, materials are coming in, all that kind of stuff. Some days are more like business development oriented, where it's talking to clients or pre-con type things. Clients are coming in, we're reviewing their job, kind of going over details. And some days are a little bit more strategic in terms of like, okay, over the past, these are the things that didn't work. Okay, I need to improve this family, which is like a Revit term, needs rebuilt. This needs to be implemented. Okay, doing this process, placing all these dimensions, this takes too long. I need to find a way to automate this. What tools are available? We have a couple developers that I've worked with in the past, and we've worked in the past. Can we automate this? Can we improve this? So it kind of varies. I would say most of the time it's very operational heavy. The strategic stuff and the business development stuff are not as much of my day. I would say operations is a large majority of it.
Okay, so really these are pretty jam-packed days, right? And you have to handle a lot of different operational challenges. What would you say, a technology or even a feature that you think is really missing in your line of work?
Ooh, that's a good question. Right now, I would just say like actual true integration. Like I know a lot of softwares claim they have an API, but they can make it rather difficult to get access to. And so there's still a lot of things that are not tied together the way they should be. And certain softwares make getting access to their API. I mean, just very simple stuff. And I come from an operations standpoint, so I'm not sponsored by any like software companies. So like just simple stuff. Like if a GC we use Procore. That is our project management tool that we use. Mm-hmm. Some GCs have their drawings in Plan Grid. I just simply want the ability to pull the GC's drawings from their Plan Grid into our Procore account. I don't want to have to download them and then re-upload them to Procore, but it's just simple stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And so, because my viewpoint is, as a subcontractor, a lot of subs, they'll say, our PM tool is whatever the GCs use. As a sub, we want our own playbook. As Reliance Interiors, as BIMTech Prefab, this is how we operate. This is what we do. This is how it gets done. If we're constantly catering to how every GC operates, we have no playbook. It's like a soccer team. A soccer team has plays that they like to run. They don't constantly, change their way they operate based on who they're playing. They have their way that they like to play soccer. They might add a few wrinkles here and there based on certain team's weakness, but they like to play the way that they have their own set of plays. And so it's just simple stuff like that. I mean, yeah, people can talk about AI and all this other stuff, and that's all great. And I definitely believe it. We definitely, are aware of it and trying stuff out. But at the end of the day, I'm beholden to operations. Like I said, if things don't go right, there's issues. Dollars get lost, time gets lost, people can get hurt, you can get cussed out, schedules get missed, all sorts of other issues. And so I'm not necessarily looking at what's the flashiest, me being able to pull drawings from Plan Grid to Procore isn't going to make this like a marketing headline. It's not very flashy. It's just very cut and dry, but it's very, very, it's big. It's important because it's a time waste of a PM or an assistant project manager doing something that they don't need to be doing. And so the way I view it is it's very, again, like I said, it's very operational based. I'm not a marketing person. I'm not trying to get eyeballs. I'm worried about bottom dollars. I'm worried about schedule. So that's kind of what I'm looking for in a tool, if that makes sense. And yeah, I mean, trust me, I'm still a nerd. I like to see all the cool, flashy stuff out there. But at the end of the day, like I have to look at what's going to actually impact the operations at the end of the day, not just be cool for me to use on my LinkedIn account or something like that.
Okay, cool. So kind of to summarize that point, it's like you're saying integrations. The simple things will make the headlines, will make work much easier and also prone to a lot less mistakes. You're not downloading, uploading it. So that's super interesting. I mean, it's something, it's funny because most of the people look at technology, they're thinking about gadgets, but really what technology is about is it's one of the many tools that fall under innovation, over rethinking or challenging a way that we're doing, something. And so the simple things in life, I think that's also kind of a common commonality throughout the entire conversations. Just start simple. We're looking to solve simple problems. And kind of what's your view of the future? We're kind of wrapping up in a moment, but what's your perspective? What's going to future look like?
I mean, so personally, for me, I'll consider my job successful the day that this becomes reality. This is kind of the vision that I'm personally working towards. So for example, screws and power actuated fasteners are very common for our trade. Like we fire thousands of these a day. And so the day I can look at a 3D model and know exactly down to the, like, okay, it's 3:50 p.m. in 23 seconds Eastern Standard Time. I want to know at that moment we are here in construction. Out of the 10 million fasteners we had to fire, 5,296,000 of them are installed, whatever. That's one vision. The other vision is knowing exactly we've spent this amount of money. We're this far complete actually. That's kind of like, when that happens, I'll consider, this work done. But until that happens, and that's kind of like the vision I'm kind of going towards. And from a purely technology, I just had this discussion with our VP today. I said, from a purely technology standpoint, barring operations, barring site issues, barring all the other stuff, from a purely technology standpoint, all this is possible. Like, this is all possible. I can fire a missile to the United States and hit something I can't even see thousands and thousands of miles away. We can put stuff in space. All this stuff is completely possible. I said there's just barriers into getting it into operations and making it truly work, if that makes sense. We can go out and demonstrate a solution today to count how many screws were installed, or to count how many shots, which are PAFs, we just call them shots, how many shots were fired. But it's not operationally efficient. It's cumbersome, it doesn't really work. So that's my few visions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's kind of bringing down to a very granular level of detail, right? Connecting the design to the execution to kind of really understand what actually happened, and kind of you're saying it's not that it doesn't exist, it's just not operational, right? So you're envisioning, maybe tell me if I'm getting it right, but you're envisioning the future of making this a lot more operational so that it actually be pragmatic and practical.
Yeah, that's 100% correct. I want to look at a dashboard. I want to see exactly where we're at financially on a project, down to the last 5 seconds ago, we just spent $10 doing whatever. And I want to see a model that goes, we are exactly this far along with what we've fabricated, what we've shipped, what we've installed, what we're building, what the machines are rolling, what this guy's cutting, all that kind of stuff. That's exactly it. It's exactly what I want to see. That's the goal.
This was awesome. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much for the insights.
Thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate you reaching out, and I wish you the best of luck with your future shows.